I need a couple more volunteers. Well, welcome to our class this evening, and sometimes it sounds like I'm in a cave, so I have to get these. Thank you. I apologize for having not finished the handout, and so I had to do it in two sections. We are in 1 Samuel chapter 16 tonight. If you remember, in chapter 15, we have the incident with Saul and the Amalekites, where Saul failed to obey the Lord and utterly destroyed the Amalekites. And as a result of the actions of chapter 13, not waiting on Samuel for sacrifices, and Saul took it upon himself to offer sacrifices, the rash oath that Saul made in chapter 14, and then the incident of the Amalekites. God rejected Saul as king of Israel. And as a symbol of that rending of the kingdom from Saul, Saul grabbed Samuel's robe as he left and tore it. And Samuel used that as a lesson and said, by the same way, the Lord has taken the kingdom from you. So we have Saul rejected his king. He's already given us a hint back in chapter 13, I believe it is, that the Lord would pick a man after his own heart. We get to chapter 16, and, well, let's just start reading when I get turned to the right place. Now the Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I am sending you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I provided myself a king among his sons." We don't know how much time has elapsed, but at the end of chapter 15, Samuel was mourning for Saul. Even though God had rejected him as king, it's like Samuel couldn't get over it. As many times as I've read this text, I don't understand why Samuel was so fixed upon King Saul. But once he anointed him as king, I think Samuel felt this responsibility. And so when the Lord rejected him, Samuel mourned. And again, we don't know how much time has elapsed, but evidently quite some time. And the Lord finally said, "Samuel, it's time to get over it. How much longer are you going to mourn for this man I've rejected?" And so he says, "I want you to get your horn full of oil, probably olive oil, and I want you to go and anoint a king from among the sons of Jesse." And Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears it, he will kill me." Again, He's mourning for this guy, but yet he knows if he does something to cross him, he'll kill him. And again, that conflict is hard for me to understand. But knowing who Saul is, I think I'd be just like Samuel. I'd be afraid to do what he's got to do. But the Lord said, take a heifer with you. Isn't that interesting? Does everybody know what a heifer is? Okay. If you don't, go Google it and find out what a heifer is.
A mean young woman?
Do what?
A mean young woman?
Well, that's one definition. I don't know that you'll find it in a lot of dictionaries, but it is one definition that we know. I better get away from that one. But the Lord said, take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice the Lord. So the Lord provides an alibi for Samuel. And again, sometimes the intrigue involved in some of these things fascinates me. The Lord is giving Samuel an alibi by giving him this thing. Well, just you take a heifer and go down and you're going to offer a sacrifice to me down in Bethlehem. Then invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do. You shall anoint for me the one I name to you. So the Lord's made it very plain. I'm watching out for you. Saul could never understand that. Saul could never put his full trust in the Lord, but Samuel would. And so the Lord's given him this mission, so what does he do? So Samuel did what the Lord said. Why would I put Debir there? I'm sorry?
The purpose of the heifer. What was the purpose?
I'm sorry. I apologize.
My fault.
No, it's
The purpose of the heifer.
the purpose of the heifer. Well, that's a good question. It was just an animal for the sacrifice. He could have said take a goat or whatever, but in that case, he specified a heifer, which is kind of interesting.
It gave him a reason
Yeah.
to go in.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of animal really isn't important, but when it brings up a heifer, it's just something that, well, most of us are a little older, but if you ask the kids, would they know what a heifer was? Probably not. Probably not. But hopefully all of us did. And but it was not the type of animal that mattered. It was that it gave him an alibi with some kind of animal to offer for sacrifice. But he used this word Debir all through chapter 15. Saul refused to obey the dabar, the word of the Lord. And the verb to give a dabar, to give a word, is to say or speak. And like English, there's a lot of words for speaking, saying, declaring. And in Hebrew, there's a lot of different words. But this one is the root of that dabar. So Samuel did what the Lord said. Samuel, unlike Saul, obeyed the word of the Lord. That's the point. And I think the use of Debir was the reason. And he went to Bethlehem, and the elders of the town, and remember, the elders in Jewish society, they ran the place. And so the elders of the city, we have lots of cases of meeting the elders at the gates of the city and making decisions and all. But here the elders of the city trembled at Samuel's coming and said, do you come peaceably? Do you come in shalom? Do you come in peace? Why?
They don't want to end up like Agag.
Well, I think that's a good.
We got to do that once and you get a reputation.
Remember last time we talked about, he didn't just kill him. He didn't just hang him. He didn't just pierce him with a sword. He hacked him to pieces. Now, I don't know how old Samuel is at this point, but he's probably got some age on him. And he's hacking. I mean, I can't imagine me doing that. I just can't fathom this.
The killing of Agag is one thing, but perhaps the second thing would be he is a judge. And in his circuits, I imagine there were things brought to him, and perhaps there were judgments made, so maybe just feared his coming because the judge is coming, so what have we done wrong?
Well, let me raise a rhetorical question.
Okay?
Is he still a judge?
That's a good question.
Now that Saul is king, they've rejected him as judge.
That's a good
I'm sorry, I just had to.
I mean, when it came down to it, you saw which one is the trumpet card. You know, which one had the power at the end of the day is the one that got behind them, right? So, yeah,
Well, and there could be a lot of reasons, and touching on what James just said, here is the man who is God's messenger. He is the priest. He has been judge. He is the Lord's spokesman. He's the one who gives the messages, the word of the Lord to the king. He has just chopped Agag to pieces. They know this man is powerful. And why is he coming to Bethlehem? I mean, he ought to be going to Gibeah or Gilgal, but why Bethlehem? So there's a lot of reasons we could probably come up with of why he went to Bethlehem or why the elders of the city were afraid of him. But there's no doubt, that they were afraid for some reason. Something had made them afraid because Samuel was coming to their town. And he said, peaceably, I come in peace. I come in shalom. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. So now he gives his alibi. Here's the reason I'm here. I've come to offer a sacrifice to the Lord. And so he tells the elders of the city, sanctify yourselves. Sanctify, kadosh, that verb is the same as consecrate, make holy, set apart for service to God. So he says, sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice. So he invites the elders of the city to this sacrifice. Now that makes his alibi pretty valid. If the elders of the city come and see he's just making a sacrifice, no suspicions raised, that would be something the priest would do. And then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. I don't know, but that raises some questions. He tells the elders of the city, go sanctify yourselves, but then he goes and sanctifies Jesse and his sons. That's kind of a interesting thing. But again, he's a priest. He can bless people. And so he does that. Now, how he does this, when he does this, we don't really know. It raises, again, a bunch of questions of this separation between the elders of the city or the general population and what he does with Jesse and his sons. Because as we read the story, where are the elders? Well, they were there to sacrifice, but are they going to be there a little later? And I think the story unfolds for us a little bit.
is Jesse an elder?
We don't know.
It's not implied.
It's not implied. But it's a good possibility he may have been.
He was right, he was there.
Yeah. But does that really, I guess the next thing we could say was, what does this consecration involve? Well, if we go back and read some passages, and one of them is when Jacob, you remember, I think I put that passage there, Genesis 35. Yes. Genesis 35, beginning in verse 1. Then God said to Jacob, "Arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there, and make an altar there to God who appeared to you when you fled from the face of Esau your brother." And Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, "Put away the foreign gods that are among you, purify yourselves, and change your garments." And there's other passages we could read, but it seems like consecrating oneself, and you may remember when the Israelites arrived at Mount Sinai, they had to consecrate themselves, and it involved washing their bodies, changing their clothes, and not having sexual relations. Those three things seem to be definite in setting yourself apart for God's service at that particular point in time. So it was, Vayahi. Those of you who've been in my class for a long time know that's one of my favorite. I just love to say it, Vayahi. And so it was. When they came, that he looked at, I'll just call him Eliab, and said, "Surely the Lord's," this is probably as far as we're going to get tonight, "surely the Lord's anointed is before him." So who, where, when is this taking place? Apparently, it's between the sacrifice and the meal. They would have a sacrifice, and then later they would eat the portion of the sacrifice that they could eat. And so evidently, this scene of the sons of Jesse passing before Samuel is done in a family setting without the elders of the city. Now, again, that's an assumption, but it seems to fit that they're waiting on the meal to be prepared. They've left the sacrificial site, and so this occurs. And so Eliab is the oldest son of Jesse. Evidently a tall, good-looking guy. And Samuel, he sees him and says, "That's got to be him." He's the firstborn. He's the oldest. He's a good-looking chap, just like Saul was. This has got to be the guy. But he said, "Surely the Lord's Messiah." That's the word for Messiah in the Old Testament. And Messiah is the anointed one. The Christ was the Messiah because he was going to be the anointed one. Well, here Samuel sees Eliab and he says, "Surely this is the Lord's." They could have translated it Messiah. Now that'd be real confusing to people, wouldn't it? Because he was not the promised Messiah, but he was a Messiah in the sense he was the anointed one. Does that make sense? I don't want to get you confused, but we need to understand that Messiah was a term that all the Jewish people would understand. It was used here, but when they say the promised Messiah that was going to do all these things, they would understand what the Messiah meant. And so that's what Samuel thought. This is the anointed one right before me. But the Lord said to Samuel, and boy, this is one of those phrases we've got kind of fixed in our minds. Do not look at his appearance or at his physical stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord does not see as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. A very important truth that we understand, but there's something else that's interesting about this. I don't know how long it's been since we've seen this word, but when we see, I have trouble finding that little red dot. The word for man here, all through this book so far, man has been ish. A man is ish, and that means gender specific, ish. But here, Adam, generic. I mean, this is mankind. So that applies to the women also. For we humans look at the outward, we do it every day, don't we? We size people up by how they're dressed, by how they look. We're doing that as Adams. Well, it wouldn't be Adams, but Adamine. But we do it as mankind, humankind looks. And I just found that interesting that the Holy Spirit does some interesting things with Scripture that we often miss. And that's one of them that I think's kind of fascinating, that he's not saying this is the way man looks. He's humankind. That's the way we are. That's the way we're wired. And we look at the outward appearance because I can't judge your heart. I don't know what you're thinking. I don't know what Liam's thinking right now. He may be thinking about what he's going to eat when he gets home, or what he's going to. I don't know what he's thinking. I mean, I'm thinking he might be thinking about this class, but I don't know, because all I can see is his outward appearance. He can fool me. You can't fool the Lord. And that's, again, if there's any lesson we need to get out of this, it's that one. Not to judge other people, because we can't see inside. But remember, the Lord knows what we're thinking. Well, maybe one more. So Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel, and he said, neither has the Lord chosen this one. Don't you wonder how the Lord told him? Well, I do. I mean, is he whispering in Samuel's ear? Does Samuel intellectually know that God sends some sensory signal to his brain, and so he knows? I don't.
When I was a child, it was a small, still voice. Wasn't it?
Well,
Hannah left him with Eli.
well, evidently it was audible. But here, somehow the Lord communicated him as these people are passing by. Then Jesse made Shammah pass by. And he said, neither has the Lord chosen this one. I think it's interesting that it says Jesse made him pass by. So here's the daddy. Eliab comes through, the oldest, not him. Abinadab, you're next. No. Shammah, surely. No. He's calling his boys to come across the stage in front of Samuel. The first three passed by, not chosen. So that's where we're going to stop. And But we don't know what number 4's named right now, do we? Or 5 or 6. We're going to pick up number 7 next week. But thank you for being here. Have a good rest of the week.
But I think that you think about the speech, when God, spoke to sitting on the speaker's center. How did he receive that? Just like you said, was it audible? And then he said, as the people passed by, why did nobody else hear it? You know? But
Well,
just on-
I'm sorry, Steve, I couldn't hear the first part you said, so.
I said, I was thinking about it as you were, how did he get this message?
Yeah, yeah.
Verbally, or, did somebody touch him,
It raises a question,
Yeah,
and
and then when all the people passed by, he was being spoken to, and nobody else heard it but him.
well, maybe you and I are the only one who have inquiring minds that want to know.